I rise today to urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support our efforts to come to the relief of millions of Americans who are suffering in the wake of Superstorm Sandy. I want to thank my fellow senators from the Northeast, especially Senators Lautenberg and Menendez and Senator Schumer, for all of their leadership. We've been working in unison with many of our colleagues, and we have been testifying at hearings and talked to our other colleagues since the storm hit. I also want to give special thanks to Senator Landrieu, who, because her state has suffered so much, she has had not only deep experience in advocating for families who are suffering, but she's demonstrated extraordinary leadership in bringing together a bill that can begin to meet some of those needs. I also want to thank Senator Boxer for holding a hearing in the Environment and Public Works Committee. That hearing allowed all of the senators to speak on behalf of their states, our members of our delegations, to bear witness to what actually took place. Now, Superstorm Sandy was a storm unlike anything we had ever seen in the Northeast before. The sheer magnitude and force struck the most densely populated parts of the region. As you can see here, the purple is where the storm hit hardest, then the red onto the yellow. In Sandy's wake, more than 40 New Yorkers lost their lives, and hundreds of thousands more have lost their homes or seen significant damage to their neighborhoods, their businesses, and their families are currently still suffering. I'll just share one story to show the depth of the challenge that these families are facing. This one man, his name is Pedro Correa. He's from Staten Island. Now, Pedro is a lifelong New Yorker. When he saw the Twin Towers fall on 9/11, he answered the call of duty. He went to Iraq. He served our country. And since returning home to his family, he continues to serve in public service. He and his wife have 2 kids, ages 2 and 6, in their Oakwood Beach home. As Sandy approached, Pedro was very smart. He got his family and his children out. He got them to higher ground, to a safer place. Unfortunately, he stayed, and the brutal winds hit his home and his community so hard, winds of unbelievable force. It blew his roof off. It collapsed the structure of his house. Floodwaters flowed in. With the rising water, he literally felt his life was at risk. He called his wife and kids to say goodbye. But he was a strong man, and he endured. He actually was able to fight the storm waters and swam to safety to a neighbor's house. Now, you'd think that was going to be the worst for Pedro and his family, but it's not. It's actually not. His house was completely destroyed, but as he's begun his efforts to rebuild, he's found roadblock after roadblock, challenge after challenge, and difficulty in that small effort of beginning to rebuild. He called his insurance company. His insurance is capped at half of the value of his home. He called FEMA. FEMA offered him $2,800. Now, this is a man any of us would be proud to call our own son. He lived through 9/11. He went to fight for our country. He continues public service. And now he's literally in the fight for his own life, for his own family's well-being and safety. His only choice currently is bankruptcy. Now, Americans are watching us and asking, are we going to come together to help these families? Will we stand as one body and do the right thing by these families, these communities, these businesses that are just trying to get back on their feet? One thing is clear. There are too many of these stories for any of us to bear. Now, after spending time in the communities that were hardest hit, from New York City to the Hudson Valley to Long Island, I can tell you the images of the devastation are worse than I've personally ever seen or witnessed. I've spent day after day meeting with families whose lives have been shattered, homes destroyed like this one. And many of them are worried because obviously as winter sets in, They don't think they can return to their homes. How will they get their kids back in school? How will they rebuild their lives? But amid all of this destruction, one story continues to emerge. Neighbors helping neighbors, unbelievable acts of generosity, kindness. I've met volunteers from every state in this country who came to help Sandy's victims, young kids who want to do their part. I met a bunch of kids, veterans, who had already served in Iraq and Afghanistan, that were there just to help people clean out their basements. They put on some gloves, they put on their work boots, and they just shoveled out basements for days and days. I met one gentleman who, like this house, had a boat in the middle of his restaurant, and he just said to me, he said, "Kirsten, we'll rebuild, and we'll rebuild better." And we agreed that we would have dinner at that restaurant a year from now. So that resolve, that determination to build is something that is never in short supply in New York. As we know, New Yorkers, we're very tough. We can get knocked down, but every single time we will get up. We may be forced to bend, but we will not break. And we can't do it alone. We need the rest of this body, the rest of Congress, to come to our support. Now, there's been a lot of discussion I've had with my colleagues over the past few days about the bill. We're moving too quickly, it costs too much. But please, for a moment, think of devastation in your own states. Think of talking to a family with children who have no place to go. Imagine what it would be like to be without a home, particularly during these holidays. Families need just a small amount of support to begin to rebuild. Now, New York, because of where it was hit, a lot of our infrastructure was damaged. And a lot of these projects are extremely expensive. But these projects are emergency spending. Major transportation infrastructure, like the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. This tunnel itself, this is a subway, but the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel alone would take $700 million to rebuild. So when we're talking about a bill, you can't say, well, just fund a little bit today and we'll fund the rest tomorrow, because that's not how business works. It's not how a contract works. You either contract to rebuild the tunnel or you don't. You either make the changes to rebuild it or you don't. You can't say, well, we'll put down a little now. No state or city can operate that way. If you don't know the funds are there in advance, you cannot start to rebuild. The same is true for our houses. We've estimated there's $10 billion of damage to these homes. If you say, well, just give you a little now, well, how is that homeowner going to know if they'll ever be able to rebuild if no one is there to help them? We have always funded disaster projects when they are needed. We have not asked for offsets. We have not asked for them to be paid for in advance. That's what a disaster is. That's what disaster funding is about. So I think it's important that we look to New York and say, we will be there for you. We will stand with you. New York has stood by every other state, every other region in the country when they have had disaster come to their doorstep. Another concern my colleagues have brought up is this issue of what portion of the bill is for future prevention. We call it mitigation. The reality is if you're going to rebuild a subway like this and you don't do it in a way that protects against flooding the next time, then you're wasting your money. So mitigation is attached to each and every project that it's going to be used for. So when we fix the tunnel, when we fix the subway, when we fix any part of our city, that it'll be done in a way that's smart and not blind to future risks. Some have also asked the question about Army Corps of Engineers projects. Now, for those who aren't in Washington speak, what the Army Corps of Engineers funds are a lot of the projects related to our coastal lines or to any kind of waterway. They do the engineering required and then the work that has to be done to make sure a beach isn't vulnerable after a massive storm like we've seen. Because of Sandy, much of the Army Corps infrastructure that provided this critical protection was washed away or significantly damaged, leaving a lot of our shoreline exposed. So even if a minor storm hits, lives will be at risk. Now, what we look in history, after Hurricane Katrina, Congress and the Bush administration immediately provided the Army Corps with $3.3 billion of repair and mitigation with no offsets. Even funds appropriated in 2008 for the Gulf Coast hurricanes, 3 years after the storms were hit, were designated as disaster and emergency funding. In fact, since 1989, Congress has passed 36 emergency appropriations for disaster without any specifically dedicated outside offsets. Now, Mr. President, it's been 50 days since Hurricane Sandy hit our shores. We need to act swiftly. When Hurricane Katrina battered the Gulf Coast, the members of this body and the House united. We passed 2 emergency spending relief bills worth $60 billion within 10 days. Congress did the same for Hurricane Andrew and within weeks of the Twin Towers falling on 9/11. I know that the members of this body can come together. When disasters strike, we always find a way to do the right thing. It's time to do the same today. It's the fundamental role of government to protect people, to help rebuild communities when disasters strike. When so many lives have been destroyed and so many communities lay in rubble, when businesses don't know how to begin to rebuild, that is when we have to stand strong and we have to come together. No doubt, we have serious challenges ahead of us, but none of us were sent here to Congress to do what's easy. We serve to do what's right, especially when it's hard, especially when families are counting on us. So I ask my colleagues to find goodwill, to open their hearts, and stand by those families who have suffered so much in the Northeast.